further ado, let me introduce Lynn. Right, Lynn is takes care of quality and in Career Systems International. She is the co-author of the book "Up is Not the Only Way." I've been working with Lynn for the past few years. She is so meticulous and so high standards in doing our work, right? Making sure that we deliver good work and really support our clients to achieve the objectives. Yeah, and so this work "Up is Not the Only Way" is I think really interesting in helping us expand our definition of what career really means. In this age of disruption, what does career mobility mean, and how can we, really develop our career over the long term, right? So this is a picture of the book, right? It's also a on Amazon. Okay, so with that, right, Lynn, I'm giving you the mouse control, and so you can bring us forward.
Wonderful. Thank you, Wendy. Welcome, everybody. My name is Lynn Cowart. I'm with Career Systems International, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be here. As Wendy mentioned, she and I have worked together at Career Systems for a number of years, and it's always exciting to do work with Wendy and her colleague base. So today we're going to talk about something that's very near and dear to my heart, and it's all about the concept behind the new book, "Up is Not the Only Way, Rethinking Career Mobility." And Rudy, I thought you had a very interesting comment about this very same subject and this very same topic. The fact is that it's very difficult. We've been wired, sort of wired in our brains to think about careers only in the upward trajectory kind of capacity. And as we're getting into some things in the global world, we're seeing that that's really not the way to grow. So one of the things that I really want to encourage everyone to think about if you're trying to shift the mindset of the folks that you're working with is to really rethink the words that we use and the jargon that we use, because many times that's also what will shift the mindset. So other than vertical moves, there's a number of other ways that we can grow in our career and grow in our organization. Interestingly enough, Deloitte, who's a company that does a lot of research and obviously there's a lot of publishing of papers, talks about the fact that 87% of the workforce, the global workforce, by the way, is not really passionate about their career. And that's kind of concerning because, we spend the majority of our time at work and doing the things in our career that we really would hope that we get some satisfaction out of. So that's a very large number for folks not to be passionate about what they do. By passionate, we mean really loving every aspect of it. Now, of course, we don't love 24/7, right? We all have ideas about ways in which that we can do some things a little bit differently. But really our goal here is to figure out what really provides true career satisfaction. So there's all kinds of ways of thinking about it, but what we're going to talk about is how could we shift the mindset around this thing called career mobility. So we see that the vertical upward movement, that career ladder as we knew it, is not really the only way to succeed or to be successful in our world. So that's where we're going to be going today. Thrilled to have you here. I want to make this as interactive as possible. I think Wendy has shown you where the chat box is, and she'll be taking questions in case I don't get a chance to see them. We'll be talking about some polls, so hopefully you've got a chance to interact with that. But I'm really looking forward to hearing some of your comments around this subject that has been near and dear to my heart and my co-author's heart for the last 2 years as we thought about this concept of the book. So let's think in terms of, so what does that really mean and what does that look like? And let's see, I'm looking here to think in terms, okay, so let's talk about the demands of the compelling careers. What are some of the demands that we have? We look in terms of a couple of different ways to think about what are compelling careers. The first thing that I want you to think about is, first of all, being self-aware. And when we're self-aware, we're like, what is buried in your DNA? Like, what is it about your employees or even your own development that you just can't not do? And that means I know what I like to do, I know what I don't like to do, and I know how to make it happen. From a brand awareness standpoint, that's the next demand of a compelling career. It's colleagues asking you to join a tough assignment or a tough task form. Why do they ask you to join that join that task force. Many times we look at this and we don't realize that it's our brand. It's our reputation that really prompts people to know that from a career standpoint that we can really be trusted to go to the next step and to really help them with their career goals and what their task forces really look like. Let's see here, we're looking to get this moving forward. The next piece is trend awareness. That trend awareness is what is one, and I heard a couple of you use this term, Darlene, I think you used it well. It was all about disruption. What is one disruption that is going to impact your career in the next year or the next 3 to 5 years? Those are what we call trends. So as we think in terms of demands of compelling careers, that trend, knowing what's coming down the pike, what's on the forecast, is really important for us to think about. The next piece is being mobility aware. And mobility aware is what is the one experience that if you added it to your repertoire, it would really make your career truly satisfied. And it doesn't necessarily mean that promotion or that upward mobility. It means being aware of where you could get some other experiences or options that you might not have thought about before. And the last piece of a demand of a compelling career is something that we call resource awareness. And resource awareness is all about really understanding what is available. What are the areas that if I don't learn it now, it's going to be lost on me. You know, it'll disrupt my career if I don't think of in terms of I need to learn it now for the longer term type of thing. So it's self-aware, you know, knowing who I am, brand aware, knowing what is my reputation, trend aware, meaning what's coming down the pike to develop my career in the next 3 to 5 years. Being mobility aware, which is that there are a number of options. In fact, up is not the only way, right? I saw a number of you wondering, how do I shift the mindset of my team and of my managers? And then being resource aware about what is available to me to make it happen. That's what your employees need to be thinking about. But there's also another aspect of the positioning of is not the only way, and that is when we talk about, you know, what is the manager role? Because from a career partnership standpoint, we know that there's employees, but there's also managers that can help to make it happen. So when we talk about being self-aware, the manager needs to think in terms of active curiosity. How do I really listen to what the employee is looking for so I can help them to think about that next experience or the next option in a way that they might not have thought about before. From the manager's perspective, it's all about straight talk. If I think about brand awareness, my reputation, managers need to be very compelling and very straightforward in how I talk to my employees about what it is that their reputation or their brand is all about. So that's really an important criteria of the manager to be able to do that effectively. The next piece around trend awareness is all about future, being a future focus. How do I coach my employees as a manager to know what's coming down the pipe? Because quite frankly, as managers and as leaders, we have a better awareness of what's happening in the future. So therefore, we can coach our folks on thinking in terms of that 3 to 5 year plan. And as we all know, the careers are going to happen with or without our planning. So let's help them to make that happen. The next piece under mobility awareness as a manager is to think in terms of being option-minded. And option-minded from a manager standpoint says something like, how do I really help them to think in terms of not only vertical movement, and Rudy, this is what you mentioned, that career ladder being so prevalent, but how do I help my folks to think in terms of what's going to be happening there? And last but not least, as we think in terms of the other side of it, which is the resource awareness, how do we help them to be referral rich? And referral rich means what are the resources that are out there to make this happen? So my aim today is actually fourfold. I want to talk about the business case. How could we as leaders and HR professionals and employees really think in terms of why it's important to the company for us to be thinking in terms of the career mobility? And what is really the business rationale behind it? We know that senior leaders who are driving a lot of the strategy look at business case as a rationale. We're going to look at the Kaleidoscope career. The Kaleidoscope career is thinking in terms of multiple options, not just a telescopic view. We're going to talk in terms of experience portfolios, which is that we need to think in terms of a variety of experiences in order to really develop that ultimate career satisfaction. And then last but not least, we're going to talk in terms of ownership. Ownership means really looking at the way that we approach career development in a couple of different ways, and really shifting the owner from the manager who might have had all the control to the employee who really can make it happen. And even vice versa, if that's another way of looking at it. So those are the 4 things that we're going to be looking at to think in terms of where do we go with this and what is the role of each of the folks as we go forward. Let's talk just for a minute about the business case of the scenario. The business case has a number of different things that we want to be thinking in terms of. The first piece of the business case is we want to attract and retain a world-class team. We all want to do that. No matter what part of the globe we're in, we want to really think in terms of how do we consult for, and how do we think in terms of what we have available to us that we can use to build our business plan and our business process. The next piece is increased workforce capability. What that means is continuing to build on the people that we have in place. I mean, we have this concept in talent mobility where we talk about build versus buy. And buy means you can go out in the workplace and actually purchase, talent to come in and pay pretty high premiums. But why not build that capability from the inside? And why not really look at the folks that we have, our talent in place to make that kind of thing happen? The next piece of the business case is strengthening resiliency. And strengthening resiliency is how do we look around, actively look around for the next steps? I mean, do we honestly think about experiences as next steps? Because I think, as we've mentioned earlier, what I saw a number of you mention is that, we've got this one-size-fits-all vertical movement. And if I could really strengthen the resiliency of looking at different options, I think my team will be that much stronger and that much more mobile, and my organization will be that much more successful as a result. And that's really what we're into, this, the partnership of the employee, the manager or the leader, and then also the organization, and how do we make that happen? And then how do we stimulate the employee voice power? Employee voice power is not waiting for the manager to answer our requests. It's about the employee having the voice in that partnership model. And how do we really make that happen? How does the employee take on the role of, I really do own my career? And then last but not least, I think many of you are probably experiencing this, is recognizing the flattened organization. There's fewer opportunities for that upward mobility or that vertical growth because organizations are flattened. So how do we recognize that flattened organization has prompted lesser and lesser opportunities, but more so the opportunity to say that, we realize that maybe up was not right for everybody all the time anyway. So that's the business case, and that's how we kind of sell this to folks, to really get them to understand what it's all about. So Wendy, if I can ask you, I would like to know in the chat box, why are you here? If we can take a look at the chat and say, why are you here? What is your business case? What is it that you know of in your own organization that's prompting this to be an important factor? Rudy, you mentioned changing the mindset maybe of leaders and managers to think that up really is the way, the ladder is still important. But what is your rationale for being here? And I'm going to check the chat box to see what we can do. Thank you, Wendy. Why are you here? What is your business case? Why is career development important to you? And what are you hoping to get out of our time together so we can really craft this towards your end result?
Yeah, let's hear some response. There have been several of you who have joined. We have heard from Rudy, Darlene, and Michael, as well as Lucy on what led you to be here. So, we'll love to hear from Echo, from Miyako, JC, Eileen, Nicholas, right? Tara, Pauling, SK, and we have two colleagues, two friends from SJP, right? So please share with us, why are you here? What's the business case?
What is your business
What do you want to get?
Why is this important to you? And I think what I'll do in the interest of time is I'm going to let you type those in. I'm going to check the chat box. And Wendy, you can interrupt me as we come in. Oh, there we go. I see a JC to everyone. I think the business case for retaining talent is very important. JC, that is so true. Retaining talent is one of the top rationale for the build versus buy, right? We hope we can build an organization and keep that talent there because it's very costly to go outside. And we also want to be retaining the right talent. And that's what talent mobility is really all about. Business case, increase workforce capacity, or capability, and strength and resiliency. Yep. Echo would like to know how to change the mindset of mid-level management where they behave as the bottleneck for people under them to grow. Happens all the time, Echo. Thank you for that. And the flattened organization is more talked about than operationalized. JC, that happens often as well. That's very true. But how do we help to move that needle a little bit to operationalize that flattened organization into something that's more experiential? Michael likes my awareness slide. Could you flash it again? Let's look back at the awareness slide. Go back, and I'm not sure which one that is exactly, Michael, but let's see if we can't find the awareness slide, Wendy.
Are you talking about this?
Is that the one, Michael? Just give us a yes or a no. And C. Chan is here to attract and retain a capable team and reduce brain drain. Awesome, absolutely. And JL says self-driving career strategy for increased employee engagement. Yeah, because then employee engagement and career development are very closely tied. So we don't want to lose sight of the fact that if we can develop a career development strategy that people can really abide by, employee engagement will go up and vice versa. So Michael, yeah, there is your slide, and I'm sure that Wendy will not have an issue if she wants to. Wendy, I believe you probably can share this slide with the others that are on the call afterwards if you'd like to. But yeah, those white boxes are all about the employee and what is their compelling case, and the red boxes are what's in this for the manager. Because up is not the only way is a piece that is directed towards both the managers and the employees, so both can really benefit from what it is that we're trying to do when it comes to building a talent mobile career and a talent mobile organization.
Yeah, and Lynn, I just want to add to this because Lucy typed in while you were speaking that she says that she wants to understand how to avoid attrition when people have the capabilities to develop their careers. So just to add to the question.
Yeah. How can we avoid attrition when we're looking at that career? I think that, and it was Lucy, was that Wendy, Lucy that mentioned that? Yeah, Lucy, yes. A really good way, and the entire team. Let me say one word over and over again that will help will help with retention. It's all about conversation. And when managers and leaders have conversations consistently with their employees about what it will take to not only engage them, to help them to grow their career. And again, I'm going to caution all of you to think in terms of career growth and not promotion, not vertical. But having constant conversations, the manager will learn a lot more about the individual and what they really are looking for. And many times what they may be looking for is something that is not something very drastic or dramatic or anything even significant. It's something that can be very easily attained. And you'll see that as we go on a little bit later as we talk about things like enrichment and exploratory kinds of opportunities. All right. Thank you for that, Lucy.
Okay, good.
All right. So as we move forward, so why bother with mobility? And, we have a why bother situation of so why is this even important? Why are we spending some time talking about it? Well, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, up never worked for everyone. In fact, sometimes people would want promotions because the symbolic signs of success were there, only to find out that it wasn't what they thought it was going to be. The next piece about why bother is that career mobility impacts the bottom line. When we have a very rich, a very diverse organization and a team that loves what they do because they've got a number of different skills and things they've developed, it really does impact your productivity. And we all know productivity does impact the bottom line, and engagement impacts your bottom line. So you've got a much more satisfied, much more enriched organization. Oh, Lucy, you're welcome. Thank you as well for the question. We're in the midst of a rapidly changing workplace. And what that means is we look at something called a VUCA environment. And I don't know if you all know the acronym of VUCA, V-U-C-A, but V stands for, Bob Johansson actually wrote about this in one of his recent books, but it's volatility, it's uncertainty, it's change, and it's ambiguity. And those three things are what's really driving our environment right now. The manager and the employee covenant is more important than ever. The number one reason why studies tell us, yeah, so true. I agree, Michael. Thank you for that. I love that reinforcement. It tells us, you're really you really get it, and we really could move this needle forward. The VUCA or the manager-employee covenant is more important because people don't leave organizations, right? The number one reason people leave organizations is not because of the organization and not because of the work, but it's because of the manager. That covenant of that relationship that starts with a conversation, Lucy, to your question, is ultimately more important. And the next piece of it was the last part of the why bother is thinking in terms of development absolutely drives engagement. So it's kind of one of those double-edged swords where we say, well, if we develop folks, we will highly engage them. And if we engage them, they'll be more open to development. So we get kind of a double win by doing both well. And it's just the right thing to do, right? It's just the right thing to do for employees to really help them to gain a satisfying career. Because as I mentioned, we're probably at work much more than we're awake at home. Talk about work-life balance, right? But the fact is, it's just the right thing to do to really understand what it's going to take to grow our employees and grow our individuals into a workforce that makes much more sense. Okay, so what gets in the way? A couple things that get in the way, and Wendy, I'm going to ask you to pull up a poll, but first of all, I just want to talk about some of the things that get in the way of career mobility. Talent hoarding. Leaders and managers that say, I don't want to give my best talent away. I don't want mobility for them because what's going to happen is I'm going to lose them. Well, the fact is you might just be losing them with or without allowing them to be career mobile. So we hoard talent and therefore we lose that opportunity to really develop a very diverse, a very mobile workforce. The next thing that happens is that we look at the philosophy is not broadcasted. We don't talk readily about the fact that we're looking to have a mobile workforce, that we're looking to move our talent into various locations. So we don't talk about it. It goes back to, Lucy, your point about conversations. If we let our team know that we are really interested in what they want to think about doing and moving to next, the experiences they want to gain, then I think we'll have a much broader approach. We have biased perceptions. Biased perceptions are that, we really think that, really, if we don't have a vertical move, we're not successful. We've got to change that. And that's that mindset shift looks around. Processes and systems are disconnect. We have a process for growing, but the systems don't support it. So we've got that disconnect there. It's an unclear ROI. We're not sure what is our return on investment as a leader if I do allow my folks to move into different directions. So we've got to clarify what's in it for the partnership. Again, the partnership is what's in it for the employee, what's in it for the manager or the team, and what's in it for the organization. So it's a win-win scenario. And last but not least, we hear this all the time. We hear this fact that I have too much to do and I don't have time to think about development. Well, we don't have time not to think about it, because what happens is if our employees are not developed, if they're not in a satisfying career with you, I guarantee you they'll begin to look elsewhere. And when they begin to look elsewhere, we find time to hire, we find time to recruit, we find time to find somebody to fill that spot, and it's much more costly. So Wendy, if you could just pull up the poll for us on what gets in the way. I'm really interested in what gets in your way, what gets in your organization's way to, as far as like, why don't we do this talent mobility thing? It makes perfect sense. And you'll see there's a number of those same reasons that we just mentioned. And if one of your reasons is not on the screen, type it in the chat box, because I really want to see what you think about what gets in the way of really having a career mobile environment. Talent hoarding. Because if somebody thought that was a good, yep. Oh, wow, it looks like we got a really good shift here. Yep, processes and systems disconnect, biased perceptions, unclear. Yeah, great, across the board, too much to do. That's the number one reason. We don't have the time. But if you're in a position of influence on this webinar right now, I want you to think in terms of what time do we invest if we don't do the right thing, right? What time do we invest when we've got to go back and hire somebody when somebody leaves? And I see that 9 of you out of 19 have voted. So thank you so much for contributing to that, because that kind of helps us to think about it. I'm going to check the chat box real quick and see if anybody has said anything there as well, because I really encourage you to do that too. So so we really want to think about what is it that really takes, and the time element really makes it. So if you're up against, I have too much to do and I can't think about developing careers, I want you to think about what is the time that we invest when we don't invest in their careers. And that's a much higher, much bigger number. So we can clear that chat. I want to thank you all. That's still the number one, even though more of you have voted. So Wendy, we can clear that out. I think I could just X out of that. Okay, so what's new and what's true? Let's think about, what's happening and what is new now. What is being trumpeted in organizations as far as career mobility? Because that's really a big part of what gets done. When we really celebrate what's happening, that's really what happens. So for those of you looking to shift the mindset, think about what you're celebrating, or what, in the States we call this, what are we trumpeting? And internationally we call it also, what are we trumpeting? Upward linear careers are unlikely to return. Those upward mobility, vertical, because flattened organizations have come into play, we're not going to see as many upward linear careers that we've seen before. So those things are not coming back. Other reasons, what's in the way? Solid organization structure. Yeah, Chris, that's very true. We have those kind of ways in which we don't really interact with each other. So we've got to break those silos. We've got to find ways to connect with other organizations and really begin the flow. And it begins again with the conversation and the communication. So what else is new? New management layers will not be added. We're not seeing an addition of managers or leaders or supervisors. What we're seeing is consultants and career experts and individual contributors that really know their subject matter well. And that's what's really coming into the workplace on a number of different levels. So title progression is still linked to career satisfaction. And we have got to find a way to shift that mindset. And that's what we're really talking about with Up Is Not the Only Way. Thank you, Chris. Appreciate that. Good point from Wendy Chan to everyone. So what that means is it's time for us to reframe. This changes the wiring of what we're thinking. Reframing or rewiring is what's really most important. So thinking in terms of going from a promotion culture, some of you ask, how do I do this? How do I shift? And this is exactly what it's all about. The promotion culture shifts to a growth culture. Remember, I use that term growth. How do we go from growth, to a growth culture instead of just thinking about promotion and advancement and vertical movement? It goes from paths to something called patterns. And those patterns are things that we look at. Oops, not sure what happened there, Wendy, but looks like I lost the screening. Yeah, we go from paths to patterns. And what that means is there's a progression of kinds of things. It's not like a career ladder where it's a logical upward mobility where you go to this step and go to the next step. It's really a number of different kaleidoscope ideas. It's advancement to enhancement. I don't want to advance unless I really have an opportunity to enhance my skills, my experiences, et cetera, et cetera. And it's from onward and upward to something called forward and toward. So we're thinking in terms of how do we move ahead in ways that we have increased job satisfaction. So what that really looks like, or the punchline, is that we go from telescopes, which is a very linear approach to career development, into the visual, the behavioral change of something called kaleidoscopes. And those kaleidoscopes are those kinds of, if we shift the look of a little bit, it changes the pattern entirely, because kaleidoscopes are really all about patterns, right? You all know kaleidoscopes are, if you shift it just a little bit, you will find different ways of looking at it. The visual is we go from this kind of telescopic view to something that looks much like this. And it's all about different ways of looking at options, opportunities, experiences, etc. And one slight shift, one way or the other, changes the entire view of one's career development. So promotion culture is still very traditional mindset. Nicholas, that's so very true. And we don't change that culture until we change our jargon and our verbiage and the way that we treat and celebrate career development experiences. And that all starts with each of us. And right, Chris, you're absolutely right, from career ladder to career lattice, meaning that most of you know that a lattice means that we have multiple ways of looking at the next step. And yeah, Jael likes that. Awesome. Let's give him a round of applause for that one, the lattice piece instead of the ladder. It really does represent entirely something different. So what that means is that we think in terms of various looks. You'll see different views here in the kaleidoscope, but one slight move one way or the other makes a ton of difference, just like it does in one's career, right? So we talk about that in rewiring the paradigm. Remember the old saying, and many of you may remember this, we have the right person at the right place at the right time, right? The right person, right place, right time. Well, we're going to shift that just a little bit to think about the rewire. And this is how you might be able to change the verbiage or the mindset around how do we think about career mobility. What it turns into is it is the right places, the right times for the right people. So we look at the places first, we think about the right times for movement, and then who are the folks who can make it, and it makes multiple opportunities happen. So what happens then when we think in terms of that is that we have multiple experience which create new patterns, okay? And what that means is that we may be moving away from job security to something called employability security. And as an employee, I may think job security is very important, right? And it really is. But if I think about employability security, if I build my experiences by a number of different ways of growing, then I have a better chance of being employable. If not here, then maybe somewhere else. And with an organization, we hope they stay here. So we want to have that partnership between the two. But, you know, it's not about job security so much about as employability. And employability means I've got a toolkit of different experiences that I can apply at any one of a number of times. So just think in terms of that kind of a process. I'm going to check the chat box and see if there's any questions here that might have come up. Yeah, Jael says we first need to reframe what is career development from promotion to experiences. Absolutely, Jael. It's shifting from job security to employability. That's exactly what we just mentioned. The view of career ownership, being entitled to move to a higher rank, is encouraged by the system. That's that applauding, C-Chan, and depending on who their previous line managers are. Managers have a huge part in here. And managers have a huge way of knowing how can I really help to make this happen. So again, it's about the jargon we use, it's about how we celebrate the experiences, and it's how our managers really help to develop those kinds of things. And as you know, managers do direct a lot of these kinds of opportunities. So what we're going to challenge folks to do if they're thinking about changing this culture or this mindset is to build a portfolio of experiences. And this is where we're going to talk about 6 different options or ways that one can grow that one might not have thought about previously. So let's hear some ways to look at alternate moves or alternate ways to think about. Grow here. Grow here is an option that is kind of a low risk but a high payoff. And I'm going to talk about what that looks like. It's something called job enrichment. And it's very simple to do. It's very low risk, but it's got a lot of benefits. So it's called Grow Here. The second portfolio piece is what we call try before you buy. It's experiences that are short term. Again, it's low risk, and it helps us to put our toe in the water to really begin to think about how can I try something before I really make it happen and I really make that ultimate quote unquote move. There's sideways to highways. So this is a huge payoff. We call it linearity versus laterality. You know, 2 ways of looking at, you know, sideways. It's that kind of that lateral move that allows us to kind of check out different things from different perspectives. Then we think in terms of the next piece, which is step back for a reason or a season. Yeah, the term career may also be redefined. Oh, I like that, Chris. And reframed, especially with some of the changes that we're seeing. Absolutely. You know, stepping back for a reason or a season, this is the one that's a tough one because it means really getting off the treadmill and looking at some different ways of moving on. And then sometimes there is when up is the way. I mean, that vertical movement may be the ultimate opportunity, and that's a good thing to do. So when you think in terms of your own organization, the last one, by the way, is the grass really greener. There's something called relocation. Is it really good to move in the other end? Is it really good to think about like what the next step is? Is the grass really greener on the other side? And we may think it is, but quite frankly, it's not. So it's really about that conversation before it happens. So when you think about your own organization, and as I go through, looking at those next pieces, I want you to think about your own team. Would you give your organization an A, which means you're stellar, it's a superstar, or is it an F, we're not doing it very well? So we're going to talk about the opportunity to say, you know, we want something called Chief Experience Officers. Yeah, here we go. Chief Experience Officers, which means we want somebody who can operate under a number of different experiences. It's a new way of looking at that CEO option. And it's really learning about agility, the chance that we can have a new kind of CEO where learning experiences are architected, or there's an architecture around looking at multiple experiences, opportunities. The first one is I want you to think in terms of the 6 different experiences by starting with Grow Here. Now, if we think about Grow Here, I want you to think in terms of what we call career calisthenics. So what happens when we grow here? Well, this is what we call job enrichment. And it's things that you can do in order to really think about, how do I grow in place? You know, the first piece of calisthenics is reaching up. And that means, is there something that my manager is doing that I would like to try? And if you're a leader, what can I delegate that my employees might want to do more of? What about the next calisthenic, which is what we call, very simply, you know, reaching out. Reaching down is the next one. And what that means is there something that you could develop a skill or build a place by looking at somebody who may be reporting to you that you want to learn more about what they're doing. The next piece of career calisthenics is doing something called reaching out. And reaching out means, what are your peers doing? Do you have other colleagues that are in the same organization or in the same department that you might be able to borrow from, or something they're doing that might seem really very cool, very enticing that you can do? And then reaching to the side is reaching out of your box a little bit and trying something new. So we talked about that as career calisthenics. That's a way to enrich your current role. The next piece is what we call try before you buy. This is really about that opportunity to think in terms of investigating possibilities. I don't know how many of you may be familiar with the term informational interviews, but this is kind of an exploratory opportunity that allows you to really look at elastic experiences. It allows you to stretch outside of your current zone and look at some things that might be looked at from a number of different ways. And it's about they're going out and asking what one is doing, finding out what it takes to be successful in the job. And we can do those in 3 ways. We look at those as small and significant. Excuse me, I'm going to go back one step because it was a little too quick. Small and significant, you know, asking some questions, being curious. Medium and meaningful, which is, I don't know what we're thinking as far as next steps, but I might want to try and just maybe shadow somebody. Or big and bold, which is, I think I'm going to take a rotational assignment somewhere and still keep the risk level low in my current job. So think in terms of that elasticity about try before you buy. The next piece that we're going to talk about is something called, we might know this as lateral. It's sideways to highways. And what that means is that there's chances for us to look outside of our current role and thinking in terms of over is the new up. You know, those lateral experiences have so many opportunities for us to expand our way of looking at the things. It's selling laterals. And this is one of those that is really super important, because many times we think of lateral moves as maybe being not successful. And we don't want you to think in terms of that. We want you to think in terms of, how could a lateral really grow my career and add to my career satisfaction? And that means expanding your scope. It means looking outside your box. And it's things like exposure to more leaders, where you might be able to look outside of your department and think about what you might want next. It's in terms of knowledge of another function, which really helps you to grow your exposure level. It's discovering new interests. I didn't really know that I liked, you know, design, but I'm doing a lot more design as a result of taking a lateral move. And sometimes that's done visibly. Sometimes it's just done like in your own mind as you think about doing more of that as you stretch out and do some lateral experiences. It's about expanding my network, getting to know others, and most importantly, having others get to know me. And it's opening up more opportunities. You know, I really found my calling because I gave myself a chance to try something new and opened up more opportunities to move ahead. And doing that by a lateral or a side-by-side over is the new up kind of way. The next step, or the next option, is stepping back for a reason or a season. And it's tough to say sometimes that I made a mistake, but many times we call this realignment because it forces us to refocus. And we refocus, we look back and we have to honestly be honest with ourselves. And we see this many, many times as people say, you know, I thought I wanted that promotion. I thought I really wanted to move up, but now I've got to realign myself because what I thought was going to be true is not something that really happened. And we've got to applaud that. We've got to let people know that that's okay. So here's a question for you. Do you label steps down or back as demotions? That's one of those verbiage things. That's one of those language things that might prompt people's mindset to say, oh, they had to step back. But really stepping back can be a huge career motivator. Do you believe choosing to refocus will knock you or your employee, if you're a leader, permanently off track? Well, maybe not. I mean, in fact, most of the time, it's going to help them to balance and think in terms of what is it that I can do more of that's going to help me have a career that's much more satisfying and help my own growth potential. And the third piece is, do you assume these experiences are for those who can't cut it? We don't want that to be the celebration. We think that stepping back for a reason or a season is a great career development opportunity because it gives you the chance to think in terms of what is it that I want to do ultimately. And I could do that by really going back to something that I know I need to learn more about. So the question for you is, are you biased? And do we talk about these as demotions or knocking people off track or thinking about in terms of who can't cut it? Because sometimes I may have to step off that treadmill. I may have to step back for whatever reason or season makes the most sense for me and not about, anybody else but me. So it's not about the perception. So think in terms of, is it a stalemate and moving up? And this can become much more important as we think in terms of how do we celebrate and how do we really change the way that we do the mindset of these types of things. The next step is that vertical, that one up is the way. And some of you may know that, many times we know that, we talk about the risks and rewards of promotion. Up may be the way. There may be a vertical opportunity here, but the fact of the matter is that maybe there's something that we want to think about that we want to look at more fully. The rungs aren't all gone. There's still a multiple vertical options and upward mobility types of things. But I want you to think about these kinds of things. And these are questions you can pose to yourself or pose to others. What will this vertical change mean for you personally, professional, and financially? What challenges will you face, and how will you handle them? There's a lot of challenges that come with those vertical moves, and people are not always ready for them. And then also, what do you need to learn to feel confident? Yeah, thank you, Chris. Gigging can be haphazard or thoughtful. Great, thank you so much. What do you need to learn to feel confident? In other words, if I'm really going to take that upward move or that vertical move that I think is so coveted, what is it that I need to learn about? Or what is it that I need to really think in terms of to feel confident so I'm ultimately successful? And what do you most and least look forward to about this experience? And that way you're going in with eyes wide open. You know what the expectations are going to be so you can make it happen. And then last but not least, the sixth option is that it be something that we call relocation. Is the grass really greener? It means leaving the organization entirely. Sometimes we leave because we don't see growth opportunities. Sometimes we think that, there's an offer out there that's much better. Maybe the culture appears better. But we've got to ask the question that if we're willing and ready and able to leave the organization, is the grass really truly always greener? So some things to think about on that relocation opportunity are things along the lines of moving out. Are you ready for it? Is it something that we want to do, need to do, have to do? And if we do, there's a couple of ways to think. One way to think is about elegant exits. Elegant exits means you don't want to burn any bridges. So if you're going to exit after you've decided, are you sure? Good luck. But I hope I can come back if I need to. Because there's a metric that we like to use that on average, about 9 months after somebody leaves the organization, thinking the grass looks greener, they may be back saying, sorry, boss, it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. So don't burn any bridges and leave elegantly so you've got the opportunity to come back and stay in touch with those folks. And then there's respectful returns. How do I come back? How do I, as a manager, welcome folks back? So keep in touch with folks when they leave. One, they may be a great client for you, right? Second, you may want to think in terms of having a very positive reputation by your ex-employees. But third, you want to think about, I may want that person to come back at some point if that grass wasn't greener. So that respectful returns that I want to welcome you back in a way that's really respectful. And that the door is always open. And if you get to the 11th hour, check their job equity. We all know what equity is. It's an investment that we have in the job. And what we think about in terms of that is there's 4 different ways that we look at equity. There's financial equity. There's that opportunity to say, what am I leaving from a compensation and financial standpoint? 401ks, benefits, things like that. What is our influence equity? How long will it take somebody to really grow and become successful in the new organization. So if I'm an employee thinking about leaving, I want to think about the influence that I'm losing or leaving behind that I've already built up. If I'm a manager, I want to remind the employees about that influence equity that they've built over the course of time. It's relationship equity. It's knowing what it took to build those relationships over time, and I've got to go back and start those from scratch. And last but not least, it's something called skill equity. I know what it takes to deploy myself. I know what it takes to be successful. I've built the skills that are necessary. So when we're leaving the organization because of relocation or because the grass looks greener on the other side, I want to remind you to think in terms of those job equity parities and paradigms that we tend to leave. All right, so we talk about ownership. Ownership is one of those things from the beginning that everybody owns their career. But as we think in terms of, Rudy, what you mentioned earlier on, how do I really get my managers thinking in terms of outside the career ladder and something more open or something more broadly? It's about ownership. And what we're doing is we're skipping from ship to shift. And there's three key stakeholders. I've alluded to these a couple of different times, but the first one is somebody who provides support, feedback, and guidance, and that means the manager. So the manager is now not entirely responsible for this. Thank you, Jael. He likes the point on job equity. It's like building a job or a career capital. That's exactly what it is. And so we have the manager as part of the ownership process who supports, provides feedback, provides guidance, etc., to get the employee to go where he or she needs to go. The next part of the ownership is to think in terms of what does it take the energy. How do I drive goals and commitment? And that comes out of the point of the employee. The employee is ultimately responsible. They've got the biggest triangle here. They've got the biggest responsibility for shifting their career. I, as the employee, know what I want to do. I want to know what my goals are. I want to know my level of commitment. And therefore, I'm the one who's really responsible for shifting that thought process. And then last but not least are the resources and the processes that come in, and those come in from the organization. So there's that partnership of it really does take all three to commit to the opportunity for career mobility, but doing it in a way that it really becomes the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So it's really shifting that mindset through the opportunity. So how do we really begin to do it? And here's the kind of the tips or what do we do? If we're going to shift the way that we look at career mobility and how we make it happen, thank you. What does the individual do? Well, first of all, the individual needs to do three things. One, we need to adopt the kaleidoscope view. The kaleidoscope view says there's a number of different ways to slightly turn that mirror to really think about the views and the ways that the views will change by one slight shift. The slight shift may mean enrichment. It might mean doing something from an exploratory standpoint. It could be very slight, but it changes your entire perspective. Find your meaning versus money balance. It's not about the money. In fact, many times, those of you with millennials, that you might be managing, coaching, meaning is important. But it's not only important to millennials, it's important to all of us. So how do I really balance that meaning versus money perspective? And commit and connect. Know what it is I want to do, and know what it is that I need to make happen, so I can commit to those moves, commit to those experiences, so that I really make it work for me, as well as for that partnership with the manager and the team and the organization, and connect with those people that can make it happen. If you're the manager, think about your high pros as well as your high pos. So often I hear, and we hear in our consulting work, about high pos, high potentials. What are we going to do to build them? But I want you to think about your high professionals, those folks who are key to our success. So we really want to develop those folks and make sure they're engaged as well, particularly if they're working in key roles or leverage roles in the organization. The manager wants to encourage optionality. Remember that talent hoarding that holds us back. So think in terms of how do I really look at all different options so I'm providing the best. Remember, your legacy is really what's on the line here. And then look at all experiences to maximize the learning. Really go back and revisit. What did you learn from that experience? What are you going to do about it? And how could we really make something happen as a result of it? So no learning is gone unnoticed. For the organization, if you're on the system side of it, or the larger piece of it, or maybe even in the HR role where you're responsible for that, let's talk patterns and not paths. Let's talk about experiences and not ladders. Think about an orb chart. Think about an orb chart. We orbit over the entire organization, and not just the org chart where there's, movements up, or this is the next step, or this is how you, think in terms of orbiting the entire organization to get the most out of your experiences. And check for those locked doors. Do we have some ways of growth that we're not taking full advantage of? And those locked doors mean that maybe we've got to open them for the folks that really want to make that happen. So activating Kaleidoscope careers, it really looks very, very simple, but it's actually very pretty when we think about it. We look at options, opportunities, experiences, choices, a number of ways to make things happen. And as we do that, as we shift those Kaleidoscope careers, we'll think about that paradigm shifting. And when that paradigm shifts, it goes from something we talked about a couple of minutes ago, and it goes from things like, the paradigm will shift if we begin to think in terms of kaleidoscopes, and it'll go from more right places, more right times, for more right people. And that's really how we're going to be looking at the ultimate end result, or the output of thinking about a career mobility culture. So what I'd like to do is I want to thank you, first of all, for being part of this, and that paradigm will shift. And what I'd like to do is, Wendy, I think we have the opportunity to not only close out, but to think in terms of any questions. I saw some great things coming forward. I know that we've got about 5 minutes left in our time together. But, can we open this up for some Q&A, whether it's unmuting your phone or looking at the chat box, and asking some questions or some opportunities of what we're seeing, maybe even with one another, and sharing some best experiences or best practices.
Yeah. Thank you, Anne. Wow, you've shared with us so much in such a short time. That's amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah, can we give Anne a round of applause for sharing with us? Yeah, and we can see your passion.
Thank you.
You're so.
Thank you, JC.
It's something that you in. Yeah, and we just want to leave a few minutes to get your questions, to get your any reactions to what Lynn has shared, right? And as you are sharing your thinking about what questions to ask, I just want to say that Flame Center, we partner with Career Systems International in the Asia Pacific region. So there is a new micro-learning module called Up is Not the Only Way that CSI has developed, that we are also, if you have any interest to learn about the micro-learning module or about our other career development solutions, please feel free to drop me a chat or to just email me, right? And my email address is here. Okay. Yeah. And so we'll just stay for a while more, and we'd love to hear. I can unmute everybody now. So if anybody wants to ask a question.
For purchase order.
Okay. Yeah, so if anybody wants to ask a question, we are still available for the next few minutes. And of course, we also want to be respectful of your time. If you need to go, feel free to go off first. And then, and then we'll stay on for anybody who wants to ask any questions or have any reactions. Okay, welcome, Eileen. Yeah, so that's right. So I can share some of these slides to you privately on via email. Okay, everybody said awesome, thank you. And okay, and I think SK, Tara, Nicholas, Michael, Lucy, JC, Jael, and Echo, Darlene, Chris, yeah, so if you're still online, let me know if you have any questions. Yeah. Thank you, Michael. Yeah, you're doing important work helping the PMETs, and it's, indeed, in these times, we need to help people change the way they think about their own careers. and like expand the possibilities of, all the skills that they have learned in their careers and how they can, reuse them in order to find new options. Yes, and Jaya has a question that some people can feel cynical that they move into the orbits without increase in pay. How can the expectations be managed or reframed? Lynn, you want to go at that? Okay, hang on, Lynn. I think I need to, yes, I just unmuted you, so sorry. Yes.
There we go. I'm talking to myself, sorry. Yeah, Jill, that's a great question. And that's where it really becomes a culture shift. I think as you celebrate some of those moves or some of those experiences or options that are not directly related to compensation, like job enrichment or exploratory, and you celebrate the fact that we're developing additional skills, we're developing additional ways to move in our careers that are more growth oriented than just vertically oriented or promotionally oriented, you will begin to see that people will start to value, and this is going to take some time, but they will start to value the increase of skills as part of their compensation, because compensation is all about, of course, that increase in pay, but growth really entails how am I going to help myself to be totally satisfied with the job that I'm doing. And, we talk about the fact that people stay for more than pay, and that career development, job satisfaction is one of the key engagement drivers that will prompt people to become much more engaged. So it's really changing the way that we verbalize and talk about different options and experiences. And it's also recognizing that the meaning versus money, and we have a chapter of that in the book, the meaning is many times much more important and significant over the long term than just the increase in pay for the moment. So, but you got to start sharing stories. Find people who have made moves that have made this part of their plan, and you'll find that people start to go, "Oh, now I get it." But you got to be you got to be storytelling, and I think we probably all know storytelling is so important. So tell the stories of people that have done it successfully and how they have gotten to a place of total satisfaction.
Yes, great. Thanks, Lynn.
You're welcome.
Okay, and we also want to be respectful of Lynn's time. I know it's 10:30 p.m. your time, and you may not have had dinner.
No
Yeah. So if there's anything, what I'll do is I'll send a summary of these slides via email, and have and then if you have any questions, we can still take it offline, right? So I want to say thank you to Lynn. I give you another applause, right? Thank you for your passion, for your care in doing this. Yeah, and we'll be in touch again. And I want to say thank you to everybody for spending your hour with us, for your applause, for your thumbs up, your great questions. And and TGIF, have a great Friday and a great weekend. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Have a great weekend, Al. Thank you for joining us. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. All right. Yes. Bye, Michael. Bye, Joe.
Bye, Michael. Bye, Joe.
Okay. I think we have another. TGIF indeed. Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Thanks, JC. Okay. Let me. Okay. I'm just really curious. SGP, JCFC. Are you still online? I'm just curious who you are. You're like a secret code. Yeah, but this person may not be online anymore. Okay, just give me a moment, Lynn. Okay.
Sure.
All right, and then hang on, let me stop recording.